Okay, welcome to Ground Control and another episode of the Pilot's Lounge. First, I wanted to talk about the YouTube channel. For those of you who've never checked out the show notes in one of the videos that I post on the YouTube channel, I always post additional information in the show notes. There should be, if I have a playlist for the item that I'm reviewing or covering, there should be a link to the playlist in the show notes. There should be links to the components or the aircraft in the show notes. If I forget to cover something in the video, or if I misstate something in the video, that information will be in the show notes. So you guys might want to check out the show notes of the video as well. There is always additional information in there. I do create a playlist for every aircraft that I review. So if you're looking for additional information or videos on one of the aircraft that I'm reviewing, check out the show notes. There's probably a link to the playlist in there. The YouTube community tab has been abandoned. I posted on the community tab and on the Facebook page that I was abandoning the YouTube community tab. And the reason that I'm doing that is because I would never get notifications if somebody had posted a comment on one of our posts on the community tab. For whatever reason, they decided to use square images. It had to be a square image or else it would horribly crop it. When everything else was 16:9 aspect ratio, why they decided on the community tab that it had to be a 1:1 aspect ratio, or else rather than being scaled it would get cropped. I have no idea why they did that. I always type up my information ahead of time and then copy it and paste it. It's just plain text. There's no formatting. Just copy it and paste it into the post, and the YouTube text editor would mess it up. It would insert line breaks where there weren't line breaks. It would remove line breaks where I had line breaks. I usually had to go in and edit the text 3 or 4 times to get everything set up properly. So I don't know why. It was a good idea. I thought it was a good idea to help creators engage more with subscribers and viewers of the channel. Unfortunately, YouTube didn't want to put any effort into it. It was half-baked. So from now on, the news that I would normally put in the community tab on the YouTube channel is now exclusively being posted on our Facebook page. So if you don't follow us on Facebook, you might want to take a look at Facebook. It'll also have posts to anything that we release on YouTube, but additional information that I post will be there instead of on the community tab on the YouTube channel. Okay, so items. First thing is items not covered since the last episode, since episode 12. A minimum RC Rare Bear FPV test. I was wanting to put a micro FPV camera on that plane to test it out. I probably won't end up doing that. I've just had too many other things to do, items to review, to test that out with an FPV camera, and I think there are probably other planes that would be better suited for FPV. I think the minimum RC, and I guess I would refer to them as nano planes because they're so lightweight. They make really good outdoor planes to fly in small areas, and I think they would make really excellent planes to fly indoors in a gymnasium or a warehouse, some large building in the winter as well. I think that minimum RC is doing a lot of really great things for micro and nano planes, and I noticed that now they have micro receivers on their site that not only have a built-in brushed motor ESC, but now they have receivers that have a built-in brushless motor ESC. So I'm hoping to acquire one of those pretty soon and review it and test it out, because that would make the electronics even more compact for these tiny planes, and I would like to build a couple more nano planes. So I'm definitely going to be checking out one of their receivers. So don't forget to check out their site and take a look at the micro electronics that they have. They have a pretty extensive list of electronics there. Okay, so another item that has not been covered yet I'm not sure if I'm going to have time to do it, which was bench test on 4S LiPo, the RacerStar 2406S 2600 kV motor versus the RacerStar BR 2508 2522 kV on 4S. I don't do a lot of flying on 4S LiPos. It's mostly 1S, 2S, 3S LiPos that I use. So I don't know if I'm going to have spare time available to conduct that test. I might not. I can't make any promises on that. I wanted to do a 50-30 prop and a 60-40 prop shootout to see which of the 60-40 props I have and the 50-30 props gave the best balance of thrust and efficiency. I will probably be able to do it with the 50-30 props because I'm going to be testing out some micro motors on 1S and 2S, and 50-30 prop I think is going to be a good candidate, at least for the 1S setup. So I probably will be testing 50-30 props, several 50-30 props on one of those motors for a micro project coming up. But I can't say whether or not I'm going to be doing the 60-40 prop. So, review updates. The Volantech Sport Cup 500. This little guy right here. This has become my new favorite trainer of all the little micro planes, trainer planes that I've flown so far. This is at the top of the list. If you haven't watched any videos on this plane, take a look at them, because this is, as far as factory planes, whether it's a micro or whether it's a mini, I think that Volantech with this plane came close to being able to check every single box with this little plane. It handles the wind very well. The gyro system is excellent. It's an absolute blast to fly an expert and expert or manual mode, and even the mid-range mode, the intermediate mode, works really well on this plane. And I never really cared for the intermediate mode on the other planes, but on this one it seems to work really well. I just can't say enough good things about this little plane. So if you know somebody that you want to introduce to RC, or if you're looking for a good little trainer plane, this is the one that I recommend over all the others. And I will be putting together a video probably in the next couple of weeks with a list of my favorite trainer planes and why they're my favorite trainer planes. So watch for that. But the Sport Cup 500 from Volantech just about hit every mark that I was looking for. The Eachine Mini F22. I said in the last episode that I was going to try and conduct some modifications on the linkage and put longer control horns on there, try to soften up the elevator in expert or manual mode. Well, I did that, and somebody inquired about it. I hadn't had time to post that information yet, but it did not seem to have any effect on that plane, no matter how much. And I dropped the control rod with those new control horns down 4 millimeters from where they were stock. I mean, that's a pretty good distance when you're talking about the length of that lever for that little plane. And it still didn't seem to soften the tail up on it at all in the pitch axis. So I almost suspect that on that Mini F22, even though you have it in expert / manual mode, that the gyro is interfering with the controls on that. I can't swear to it, but that's certainly the way it felt to me, because that should have had a huge dampening effect on that elevator on that Mini F22, and it did not. It didn't seem to have any effect whatsoever. So that's where I stopped with my mods on that plane. That was my biggest hurdle with that in expert manual mode, was the sensitivity of the elevator, and I wasn't able to overcome that. In gyro mode, it flies great. I think it makes a good trainer plane. But in expert mode, manual mode, I think it's lacking a little bit. Okay, the next review update that I have is on the GNB2S 450 milliamp 80C/160C LiPos. Okay, those came with JST connectors, and I switched those out to XT30 connectors. And I was just curious, since the XT30 connector can handle many more amps, 30 amps, as opposed to the JST connector, which I think is rated for around 9 or 10 amps maximum. I wanted to see, just out of curiosity, after I replaced the JST connectors with XT30 connectors, if that changed the measurement of the internal resistance of the LiPo, since the connector had less resistance. And it didn't. It did. At least on my meter, the batteries had exactly the same internal resistance numbers after I replaced the JST connector with the XT30 as they did with the JST connector. So that answered my question, my curiosity, and it didn't have an effect. I mean, it definitely removed the bottleneck on those batteries for the amount of amps that you could pull from it, but it did not change the internal resistance numbers at all. So just so you have that information. The Racer Star SIC 2207 2688 kV motor, really good motor, produces a lot of thrust. One of the things that I noticed when I performed my first few flights with it was on a 3S, it was coming down pretty warm. It wouldn't burn your fingers, but it was pretty warm when you put your fingers on it. And I noticed that after I had completed probably a dozen flights with that motor, I noticed that the temps were a lot lower on the motor coming down after the motor got broken in a little bit. I think maybe the bearings were a little tight on that motor, and then after the bearings loosened up a little bit, I mean, the motor and everything was still real tight, but I think that the bearings weren't heating up so much, and so the bell on the motor was much cooler when it came down. It was warm, but it was no longer very warm. So I wanted to let you know about that. The Volantex P51 Mustang. This one right here, this Mini. I had some issues. If you watch the reviews and you watch the outtakes, I had Murphy with me every step of the way with this plane. I was amazed that this plane was still in one piece by the time that I completed the review. I have made several adjustments and a couple of modifications to this plane. A link to the playlist will be in the show notes, but the reinforcement of the landing gear has worked like a charm. I have not had a single problem with the landing gear after doing that. Making some adjustments on the linkage, where the linkage is connected to the elevator control horn, the rudder control horn, the ailerons. And then after making the modification on the rigging, the internal rigging, you have to remove the main wing to get to it, but the internal rigging for the ailerons, if you've watched the most recent flights of this plane, this thing has a spectacular roll rate to the left and the right now. Man, I just love it. And this plane is now flying precisely the way I would like it to fly. For the price, it is a very good plane. Someone sent me a copy of the manual for the Easy Plug ESC list for Volantex. It was the person's name is Prestige81. I want to thank him for doing that. The ESC that came stock, although it's not labeled, it is rated for a 2S to a 3S LiPo. The motor that is in it is listed as a 2808 1800 kV motor. I think that on a 2S system, and definitely on a 3S system, that stock, it's about a 6 3/8 inch diameter 4-blade prop. I think it is overpropped for that motor, and I think that's the reason that I felt that the amp draw of that system, that tower system, was much higher than it should have been, and it was, and there's a reason for that. So what I ended up doing was I ended up replacing the 2808 1800 kV stock motor with a Racer Star 2208 1400 kV motor, and I put a less aggressive prop on it, and I'm running a 3-cell on it. And this is a 7x4 prop, and it's got plenty of power with the 3S system to pull it through. Now the stock motor and the ESC should be able to handle a 3S LiPo, but remember, the stock speed controller is only rated for 10 amps. So my recommendation, if you're going to use the stock motor, is to put a less aggressive prop on it. I would replace the stock 4-blade prop with a 2-blade prop, and go from that 6 3/8 inch diameter 4-blade prop to something like this 2-blade 7x4 prop, because it'll produce just as much thrust, but it'll be a lot more efficient. It's not gonna drain your battery so fast. But I'm extremely happy with this. Now the reason that I say there's a reason why that power system was pulling too many amps, and I'll tell you why. This motor from Volantex, the stock motor that was in that plane, is labeled as a 2808 1800 kV motor. This, in my opinion, and I know there are some companies that do this, but in my opinion, this is not a 2808 1800 kV motor. This is a 2208 1800 kV motor, because what they did to get their first measurement was they measured the outside of the bell. The outside of the bell, the diameter of the outside of the bell is 28 millimeters. The diameter of the stators, which is where, in my opinion, it should be measured when you're going to label a motor, is 22 millimeters. So this is a 2208 motor, and it was spinning that 6 3/8 inch diameter 4-blade prop. This motor, I think, was overpropped even on a 2S system, and that's why it was pulling something like 12.6, 12.7, somewhere between 12.5 and 13 amps is what it was pulling in a static position. It only had a 10 amp speed controller in it, so I think they overpropped it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set aside time to perform some testing on this motor with some less aggressive props. I'm gonna do what I did with my Volantex Super Cup, which I think has the exact same motor, and I'm going to cut the threads off of the shaft, and then I'm going to put a normal spinner type locking collet on it, so I can use a standard 5mm hub prop, and I'll put this on the thrust stand, and we'll see what kind of thrust we can get out of this motor with the less aggressive prop, so that you can stay under that 10 amp threshold if you want to use the stock power system. So I'll try and put the numbers together for that. But it's an excellent plane, and it's a blast to fly, but I think they're overstating the motor that they put in it. It's, in my opinion, that should have been labeled as a 2208 motor, not a 2808. And without the torque of a 2808 motor, that's why it was pulling the additional amps to spin that prop. Okay, the other thing that I'm going to be reviewing pretty soon is a Racer Star 1206 6000 kV motor. I'll be testing this out with several different props on 1S, 2S, and 3S LiPo system, and I'll have those numbers to publish. I don't know if I'll publish them here or if I'll publish them on Patreon, but I will be publishing that information somewhere for a future. I'm going to be testing this out for a future build. See how this compares with 1306, 1104, you know, with that KV. Okay, this 3D plane, this Yak 54. This plane is courtesy of Banggood. They sent me the kit, and I already had all the electronics for it. So I built this plane. I put a Racer Star BR 2208 1400 kV motor on it, the same motor that I put in that P51 Mustang, with an APC 7x4 slow fly prop. I'm flying this on a 3S LiPo. Even with a 550 milliamp LiPo in this plane, I can get between 5 to 6 minutes of flight time depending on how much I'm in the throttle. This also provides this plane with a 1.95 to 1 thrust to weight ratio, so you can stand it up on its tail and then accelerate upward with it. I have never flown a 3D plane before, and I am having an absolute blast with this plane. I wish I had flown a 3D plane earlier. They were just really never appealed to me, you know, a 3D plane. I thought, 3D flight, I'm not really interested in that. But even if you're not interested in 3D flight, this plane is capable of such slow flight and doing, you know, maneuvers very slowly. and it just looks so graceful in the air. It's made out of EPP foam, so it's very durable, and it is just an absolute blast to fly, whether you want to do 3D with it or not. If you just want to fly it like a traditional plane, you can do that. Just set your CG forward a little bit, and but the slow flight capability of it, the fact that you can pull the nose straight up and just climb with it and do whatever type of maneuver you want to do. I'm not very good at doing rudder, stall turns, but this thing makes it easy. Doing multiple rolls in succession, this plane makes it easy. I mean, it's a fantastic flying little plane. And like I said, I wish I had tried one of these out at, in the past, but I just didn't. So I'm not going to discount these 3D planes anymore. Even if you don't want to perform 3D maneuvers with them, they're a blast just flying like a traditional plane. So if you're looking for something that's inexpensive, that's extremely fun to fly, and you don't mind building it from a kit, I mean, it's a very straightforward build. I covered the build. I did a video of the build, and it's really easy to hand launch too. I mean, it takes right off on hand launch. If I had a nice grassy area to land in, I probably wouldn't even put a landing gear on it. I would just slide it in on the grass and make it even lighter. And I just recently tested it in some wind, 8 to 10 mile an hour wind on the ground. I'm guessing it was probably more like 10 to 12, 20 or 30 feet off the ground. And I figured a plane this light that flies this slow, it's pretty floaty. I figured that it would be a handful in a 10 to 12 mile an hour wind, and it wasn't. It was a blast. So even with some significant wind out there, this plane was a blast to fly. So I'm very impressed with this 3D plane. Now also, they incorrectly list the size of this plane on Banggood's description of this plane. I think they had it listed as a 650 millimeter wingspan plane. So the plane that I thought I was going to receive, I thought it was going to be much smaller. And so I kind of already had the electronics picked out for it, right? And then I received it, and I thought, well, this is not a 650 millimeter wingspan. This is an 800 millimeter wingspan plane, 32-inch wingspan plane. So luckily I had a motor and props and stuff big enough to put in it. But just so you know, that is not 650 millimeter wingspan plane. It is an 800 millimeter wingspan plane. It's just an absolute blast. So I wanted to let you know about that. Let's see here. Glue and Fly series. All right. I covered my alpha build of this plane in the last episode of the Pilot's Lounge. And my intention was to do a few more test flights on that plane and then release those plans. But I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it because I couldn't check all the boxes on it. Even after I got the CG all dialed in on that plane, it just did not have the slow flight capability that I wanted from it. I wanted a nano plane that you could not only fly outside, but you could fly indoors as well. That was the whole purpose between building a nano plane, was so you could do both, fly it inside or outside. And since I couldn't check all the boxes, I wasn't going to release it. So then I thought about it, and I made some design changes. I scaled it up from an 8-inch wingspan to a 10-inch wingspan. I could not find the material that I wanted to use for this project. So I ended up using Adam's ready board, 5mm ready board. I didn't think it was going to fly with having to use foam that thick. And when I took it out and performed the maiden flight, I was pleasantly surprised, just like I was with the alpha build. Except unlike with the alpha build, it's much easier to get the CG set on this one, because I changed the design a bit so that the electronics, the center mass from nose to tail is a little more spread out, which makes it a lot easier to get the CG. Plus the fact that this plane had the slow flight capability that I was looking for. So this is our version 1, and if you guys have been following our channel, you already know that. I've already posted several flights of this. So this past Sunday, I posted the plans and associated documents for building this Glue and Fly series Nano F22, and I'm having an absolute blast with it. It uses a brushless power system, runs off of a 1-cell LiPo, and I'm just extremely impressed with it. It beat my expectations. So this Sunday, I will be posting the plans and associated documents for download if you want to build this Nano Parkjet. Have something that you can fly outside in a small area, fly indoors in the wintertime. This checks all the boxes. So those will be available for our YouTube subscribers to download this Sunday. I'll try to get it posted first thing Sunday morning, so look for that. So I'm very happy about this. And in the pipe, what's coming in the pipe? Well, I already spoke about the motor testing that I'm going to be doing, the motor and prop testing. The other things that I already have another aircraft about 75% complete on the design. I'm not going to tell you what it is, other than I have dubbed it. It's going to be, the first build is going to be a micro-sized plane. It's going to be a traditional wing plane. It's not a Parkjet per se, but I have dubbed it the Gulenfly Series Micro Meteor, and that's all I will say about that project until I video the maiden flight on it, which hopefully will be within the next month. I'm hoping within the next month I will have it built and ready for its maiden flight. So that's what's in the pipe right now for me. I'm also going to be building the minimum RC Spitfire. When they sent me the kit for the B-25 Mitchell, which I've already reviewed and flown, it's a great little plane. I love that. That dual motor B-25 Mitchell from Minimum RC, and I apologize to them. They sent me both kits at the same time. I've had so many things to review, to build, to review, to test, that I just didn't have a chance to build the Spitfire. So now I'm going to have time to build the Spitfire, so I'll be putting that together and reviewing that. So look for the maiden flight on the Spitfire. I've got a Racer Star 2208 1800 kV motor on the way. I don't know when I'll get it. That'll be another motor that I will be testing, and then I will be coming out shortly with a video of my favorite trainer planes and why I picked them. So stay tuned for that. So thank you guys. Thank all of you who have subscribed to our channel. I greatly appreciate it. I want to thank all of our Patreons. Without them, we wouldn't be able to do a lot of these special projects. So thank you very much. Don't forget to check the show notes on the videos. There will be links and additional information in there. I want to thank all of you who use our affiliate account when you purchase something. That helps us out greatly. That gives us additional funds to do things like this and to do things like this. So thank you very much for that. So look for the things that are coming down the pipe, and I will see you in the air.